Good afternoon. Good
Hey
evening.
there.
Good morning, depending on where you are in this fast forward planet. Hey, Sarah McAnulty.
Hey, how's it going?
Crazy as always. So I have on the screen here the scene from pretty much exactly 1 year ago
Uh-huh.
when you March 12th, I think it was. It was more than 1 year ago when I was scrambling around. Everyone was locking down and everyone was going on their screens, and I was thinking, this is before I created a webcast, and I was thinking, who can I talk to about what it's like to connect with people on a screen? And of course, I thought about Skype a scientist and this young squid biologist, a marine biologist at the University of Connecticut, who for several years already had been finding ways to connect students and teachers with scholars and researchers in the field. So that was a year ago. I'm just going to play the opening here just for fun, because it's like this was your life.
Yeah, right.
And a longtime environmental, climate, etc. journalist, and now I'm directing a new initiative at Columbia University's Earth Institute. It's the initiative on communication and sustainability. So the idea is, how do you make information matter? We're kind of in a world where there's almost, you could say, too much information, certainly too much noise. And so it's not a function of the lack of stuff. It's a function of how do you cut through noise? How do you make progress on tough issues? And climate is only one. Right now, we drove to Greenwich Academia and Squid have, which I saw on your website, but I didn't realize they have a symbiotic relationship with anything, connectivity, I assume. So I thought you might have some lessons for folks on.
So we are
dived into the world of
right at the beginning of this lockdown, and I'm asking you for your lessons. And so here I am, 1 year later, asking you for new lessons. Or like, so what was this like? So tell people a little bit about Skype a Scientist again, for those who aren't familiar with it, but actually back up a notch and remind me and anyone listening what prompted you as a young professor, emerging scholar in marine science and biology, to even think about such a thing.
Yeah, so Skype a Scientist, really our goal is to connect scientists with as many people from as wide a background as humanly possible. And so we have existed since 2017, and we've grown so much since then. That first year we connected about a couple thousand people, and in 2020 we connected 11,600 groups with scientists. 2020 was a wild year for Skype a Scientist, for sure, and for everyone on every possible aspect of our lives. It was horrible, but at Skype a Scientist, we tried to help as much as we can. So really, we want to connect people with scientists, with personal connections with scientists. We think, I know that science is perceived as this ivory tower, separate from regular people, and we really want to break that down for a lot of people. So we do that via connection and conversation, and trying to make scientists as accessible as possible for everyone.
So at that moment in early March last year, when everyone was scrambling to go online, were you at any point sort of chuckling, like, oh, now they're going to start to get what we already got? Or was it more just still, even at that point, sort of freak out mode?
I mean, certainly no, I told you so moment. That's not how we felt at all. If we had the ability to connect the number of scientists that we do with people in real life, we would have been doing it before. It's not as though we feel that online is better or anything. It's just that it's just so much easier and more accessible, and allows us to connect with so many more people from the get-go. I certainly feel fortunate that we kind of had all the kinks worked out of our system before the pandemic hit, because we were really able to hit the ground running on connecting people with science. So yeah, I mean, we were there when folks needed us, and I'm really grateful that we were able to help as many people as we did.
So you started out as Skype a Scientist. Are you now Zoom a Scientist?
Oh my God. Tell me about it. So, yeah, when we started the program in 2017, like Skype was synonymous with getting online and talking to people. And so that's why I chose the name that we did, especially since Skype and scientists both begin with S. But yeah, most people are using Zoom for sure. And some schools like use Google Hangouts. You don't have to use Skype. You don't have to use, you can use whatever works for you to use our program, though we are mostly on Zoom.
So did that entail its own little learning curve, or is basically?
Not particularly. We had been using Zoom for a little bit before the pandemic, so that wasn't too much of a change. Honestly, not too much of what we did changed a lot because of the pandemic. The only one major change was really thinking about how to reach adults during this time, because what we had been doing before the pandemic started was going to bars, going to like subway stations, going to parks, and trying to connect with people in real life in places that they were already gathering. And in real life really wasn't a safe option for us this year. So we've kind of put it on hold. And so one thing that was really positive that came out of the pandemic for our program is that we started a weekly trivia online, and we got science interested folks showing up every week, and the community that's built around our science trivia every Thursday is really special. It has a lot of really different people that get together and connect over science, and I'm really grateful that was kind of happened, and so we do that every single Thursday.
What's the easy way to find that? Is that?
So we tweet about it every week and post about it on our Instagram. So our Instagram is at Skype a Scientist. Our Twitter is at Skype Scientist, because Skype a Scientist was taken. And I'll get information up on our website right after this meeting. It's $5 to play, and your ticket price supports our program every Thursday.
I hadn't been aware of that, and I'll show. Actually, I've got it pulled up on Twitter here, so I can show that.
Oh, great!
I need to get more active on Instagram. That's one of my areas that I'm least. Here we go. So after hours, cool.
Yeah.
So help raise funds for a very important strategy to connect teachers, students, and scientists, and have fun at the same time.
Yes. Let me get you a link for this week while we're chatting here.
And I remember early on, you were also doing library programs and the like too, not just schools.
Yes, and libraries have certainly hopped on in a big way. One thing that we had been doing for years, but that got a lot of traction this year in particular, is that we do these live sessions. These are during the day. We cover a wide variety of different scientific disciplines, and also represent a lot of different representations of scientists as people in these sessions. We have them on Zoom webinars, so they're safe for kids. One of the things that we started having to deal with, along with everybody else this year, is the problem of Zoom bombing, and that's no longer an issue that we have to deal with, because we've kind of figured out how to keep things super, super safe for everyone. But yeah, so we're using the Zoom webinar format for those. And so everybody that tunes in can ask their questions. We also have an ASL interpreter at all of those sessions so that we keep everything as accessible as possible. And then after the sessions occur, we put them on YouTube so that people can watch them asynchronously.
That sounds great. And actually, I guess Skype was safe from Zoom bombing back in the day.
Was it? Well, yeah, back in the day.
See,
but
I just want to show. So here, folks can see. Here's a tweet of one of these. I guess this was a live session.
That was last week. Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm just going to show just literally.
Skype a Scientist Live. My name is Sarah McAnulty, and I am the executive director of Skype a Scientist. And today we are super excited to have a marine biologist, somebody who knows a lot about all the cool animals who live in the ocean, even the parasites that live in the ocean, which is going to be super fun to talk about. Jimmy. So that's really all the housekeeping we have today. Jimmy, do you want to tell us who you are, what you do, and why you like it?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. So like Sarah said, my name is Jimmy Bernat. I'm 31 years old and I live in Washington, D.C., but I was born in New Jersey, so probably not that far from where Sarah is now. And I'm a marine biologist that works at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum in D.C. So right now I pretty much do research full time. I got my PhD in December, which for those of you that don't know, that's like an additional degree you could do after college, takes like 5 or 6 years. So I just finished school when I was 30 years old. I didn't like school very much when I was very young, but the longer I stayed in school, the more I liked it. And so my grandma always jokes with me that at first she couldn't get me to go to school, and then for a while she couldn't get me to leave.
That's great. Hold on, I just have to stop that. So how do you build the network of scientists? You know, what's that community been like? What was it like 2 years ago versus now? How do you kind of create the culture around Skype a scientist?
I think one of the ways that's been super helpful for us is that people just talk about it on Twitter a lot. I mean, when you have, you're going through as a scientist, maybe you're a PI leading a lab, and you spend a lot of time just like writing grants and going over a lot of the bureaucratic stuff that comes with being a professor. Maybe you're a grad student that's been focusing on this one tiny problem or experimental design situation for like months. And then you get to really zoom out and talk to kids about your work and what makes your job fun and cool. There's something about like having a bunch of third graders just like bubbling with excitement about what you do that really reminds yourself our jobs are cool as hell, and people get excited about it. So that is, I think, just really energizing for people. And so when they have these experiences, they generally stick around. And then also we ask people to share about their experiences at Skype a Scientist. So when they're tweeting about it, they share like little emails that they get afterward from classes. We have had so many really heartwarming stories about students that have never met a scientist before, never saw someone that looks like them in science. And then they had a conversation with somebody just like them that came from a place like them, actively pursuing science. And these experiences can be really powerful and then inspirational for other scientists to sign up as well.
That's fantastic. Yes, and a number of scientists at Columbia that I've gotten to know, like Angelica Patterson, who's a botanist focused on climate, who's become very active on Twitter. She's Black, and is a big part of her motivation is to ensure that young people who are Black are not feeling excluded and have role models. It feels like a really important part of what has to happen. I just got off a session with Lehman College on climate action, and Marshall Shepard made the same points about building an ecosystem that's enabling not just those who are already thinking about science, but to create a true landscape of inclusion. It feels like an important part of that.
So important. Yeah. And that's really core to a lot of what we do.
Actually, I'm just going to show a couple of the things here too from Twitter. What here? Yeah, so here's an example of here's Sadie, an incoming first-year PhD student, Princeton neuroscience, Black in neuro. Here she is. This is, an important. I come at this from the sustainability point of view, and the neuroscience and brain science, so many of these other fields, some of which are even less maybe approachable by young people, depending on where they're coming from, or if they have an antipathy for math or like. It feels like the full span of what's possible in science, and getting the new energy around it is also enabled by what you do. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
there's been such a wonderful gathering of these Black in various fields weeks that have been just so powerful and amazing to see highlighted all of these scientists from these different fields, and it's been awesome to watch.
What feels like the frontier, and how global is this? Is this still pretty North America centric, or is it?
We're all over the place. Yeah, we're all over, and in different languages. We just this a month and a half ago translated our website into Spanish. That's something we've needed to do for a really long time, and we're working on getting other languages translated as well. So so we are all over the world and in many languages. So when scientists sign up, they tell us what languages that they're fluent in. And so from there, when the educator side signs up, they can tell us what language they want to have their session in, and then we can match all based on that. Thankfully, we have such a huge database of scientists that we can usually get what folks need, as long as it's not like ultra specific in a time zone that we don't have a lot of people in a language we don't have a lot of people in. But on the whole, we do pretty well with being able to accommodate everybody. And so we're working on expanding the accessibility of our program for languages, like getting the sign up form translated into different languages. Right now it's just in English. So you need to at least have enough English proficiency to fill out the sign up form. And then from there, none of it has to be in English after that. But yeah, we're global for sure.
And how have you grown as an organization, like in terms of your budget? What are your needs still? I assume, as you were just saying earlier, fundraising is an important part of what has to happen to make this expand.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have done decently well this past year with the increase in people. We have a suggested donation when folks sign up of $10 per session that they request. Most don't do that, but that's okay. They don't have to. We want to make sure that our program is completely accessible to everybody, whether or not they have an extra $10 that they can spend on us. So we want to make sure that we're super accessible to everybody. So we mostly operate based on Patreon donations. So that's really like the backbone of our funding structure. Right now we are I'm the only full-time employee. And then we have David Jenkins, who is a scientist at AstraZeneca. He he's actually my best friend from when we were in high school. We're still best friends. And he is a computer scientist. So he's a bioinformatician. And he wrote our algorithm and does the matching, runs the matching algorithm weekly. And then Emily Karwacki, who is a wildlife management scientist. She's down in Florida. And she also has a master's in nonprofit management. So she helps us with like taxes and keeping legal and making sure we're following all the rules and all of that. Because running nonprofits is more complicated than meets the eye for sure. And so keeping everything working there is Emily's forte, and they're both part-time.
So I have to ask the other question, which is, how do you fit this into your human life?
Yeah, so one thing that I'd like to clarify, I have the title of assistant research professor at UConn, but that's just a title. It's an association that I have with UConn so that I can apply for grants using their grants office so that I can get the institutional resources that I need. But my full-time job is Skype a Scientist. And so I have that association, and it's really, really helpful for a lot of things. But I thankfully don't have a teaching load with UConn. I don't run a lab. This is my full-time life. And so I am slowly recovering from the overwork of academia mindset and trying to live a human life in addition to running this program. And we're getting there, but I still probably work more than a human should to maintain mental health. But I'm working on it.
So do you miss your squid then?
I miss my squid so much. So the way that I had a sort of weird, I kind of carved out a weird path for myself in this job. And I feel so grateful to be able to have this job. I just feel like I can't believe how lucky I am to be able to spend a full-time amount of time working on this program. But originally I was going to be working also with Atlas Obscura. They run these like science themed trips. And I would have been collecting these little bobtail squid for the lab that I did my PhD in and sending those squid back to Connecticut, along with about 10 people who aren't scientists, but just want to learn about science for the week. So we would all go to Hawaii, collect the squid, and then ship them back to the lab for the scientists at the University of Connecticut. And so because of the pandemic, That, of course, is not going to happen, and we won't be going back to Hawaii until January 2022, and we'll make sure that everybody is vaccinated, because we do not want to bring any COVID to Oahu. That's like a
Sure.
non-starter. We need to make sure that if we go back to Oahu, that we are not bringing anything that will hurt the people of Oahu. That's really, really important to us. So I was going to be working with Squid still originally, but the pandemic sort of threw a wrench in that one. But hopefully in 2022, I'll be back hanging out with Squid on the side as a side gig. Normally, it's like you have your academic job as your main job and your science communication job as your side gig. But I've kind of flipped the script on that one. My science communication is my main job and the science is my side gig.
So I think the world needs more of you, not just for this particular niche, but kind of the capacity to self-generate, to test an idea, especially in the online space, which gives you limitless potential. 7.8 billion people. There's still a digital divide, right? There's still in this country and elsewhere, there are many people who are excluded from having this kind of connection, but it's still a massive opportunity. And I don't know whether you've done any training or talks, not so much about Skype for Scientists, but how did this come about, and what are the lessons learned here that can fill other niches, and how scientists can integrate with policy making or solutions or getting kids excited. So do you do much of that yet?
Not so much. I sometimes hesitate to give career advice because my career has been incredibly lucky and not super safe. I have taken a lot of risks that may not have worked out. Like I feel like it's a miracle that I'm able to like pay rent and all that. Like I can't believe that it's worked. But I'm not saying that other people couldn't make it work. They absolutely can. So I think there's this consistent problem in career advice where there's like survivor bias, where professors can say to their trainees like, oh, just stick to it. Like you're going to get there eventually. Look at me, I got there. And that doesn't work for everybody. And so I completely agree with you that we need more people that sort of see the needs that the world has and then compares that to the skills that they have and figure out how to solve our world's problems using your skills best and what makes you happy. I was just listening to How to Save a Planet, which is a Gimlet podcast. I think it's Gimlet. Maybe it's Spotify. They had that sale thing. Anyway, with Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, and she and Alex Bloomberg have this the suggestion that you make a little Venn diagram. One bubble is what are the problems in the world? One bubble is what brings you joy, and the other bubble is what are you really good at, and figuring out what lands in the middle. Like, how can you solve the world's problems while being happy yourself and using the skills that you have? And so I feel like the job that I currently have kind of does that. And I would love to see more people, like, instead of just seeing, well, what job exists and who is willing to hire me, or like, how can I just like follow the next step on the line of those who've come before me, carve out things that work for them. And I think Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson she's another really amazing example of someone who's carved their own path in the same way that I have. And I'd love to see more people do that.
That's important enough that, why don't you restate those again? So the idea of what are the three zones to try to find
the zones? And I definitely recommend that you listen to this podcast, How to Save a Planet. Every week is like just so uplifting and focused on solutions. And I love that. And I have such huge respect for Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and all the work that she does. But the three bubbles are this is from the most recent episode of her podcast. What brings you joy? What are the problems in the world, and what skills do you have? And so how can you use your skill set to solve problems in a way that makes you happy? Because if you're happy, you're going to do better. You're not going to get as burnt out if what you're doing brings you joy.
It's great advice. Fantastic. Yeah, she's been, when I was at Pace University, we did a film about my students about coral reef conservation in the Caribbean, focused on Curacao, and she was a featured figure. This is when she was working in the Caribbean, particularly with her marine biology background. And it's been great to see Ayana burst forth
just
and
killing it,
find her voice.
Killing
it
for sure. Just doing so good. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it until now, but I do want to show one thing that feels like another one of these models that excites me just as an observer. Hold on a second. See if I can do this right. Chrome tab. I'm still getting, even a year in, I'm still my own producer here, so I have to kind of make sure I do this.
I understand that.
Yeah, so like 10 years ago, I was at a meeting on sea level rise in Nantucket, an island, mostly a low island. Mm-hmm. And there was this crew of young British educators who were there just by chance at the time doing, they had gotten a small grant to run a program they called Atlantic Rising, where they were going around the Atlantic Ocean to Nigeria, Scotland, coastal Massachusetts, running these little educational projects with students and then connecting them on Skype, actually. And this is just a little vision of what they were doing. I just took some video when we were there. Very simple surveyor's tools.
And that's about it. So right around there.
It was very windy.
Yeah.
You keep? All right, let's get you some meter sticks. That's the high tide mark for today. Now, what we're planning to do is we're planning to see what that high tide mark will be in 100 years' time. And what scientists are saying is that it's going to be 1 meter higher than it is now, so about 3 foot. Yeah.
So what was, again, it was great to see the little workshop, but then what they do online, I can't remember if I put that in here too. I guess I didn't. They were using Skype again to connect these kids in these classrooms so that you could start to have a common discussion. Kids in Nantucket and Nigeria could theoretically be talking to each other about sea level rise. And that's feels awesome. Like yet another frontier. In I don't know, like with Skype of Scientists, how many of these classrooms, did they end up with a community? Is there a way to build the classroom communities around the problems so the teachers are more connected? Is that
with each other? That's not
maybe
something
like
that currently exists, but yeah, that should be something that happens. We have a Facebook group, but it's not super active for teachers to talk amongst each other and also for scientists to talk amongst each other. I think our Twitter community is pretty scientist heavy, and I need to get a better understanding of where teachers kind of exist online and where they find their community. I think Facebook is more of a place for that than Twitter, but that's something we haven't really built yet.
Is there some role for platforms to be helping the Twitters or Facebooks or of the world? Can they be more helpful in taking you to sort of a new level?
That's a good question.
This is the phase of the conversation where I'm trying to think about where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Yeah. I would like to see Twitter verify Skype a Scientist, but other than that, I don't know how Twitter can be super useful. I mean, the problems that I see around Twitter and other platforms are so much bigger than us. Like, mostly it's all just like, deal with the hate speech, like do something about it. Stop just sitting on your butt. Like, it blows my mind. And kind of sickens me that there's nothing happening there. So that if I had Twitter's attention or Facebook's attention, I would be talking to them about that, not about our program. But I think what I really want to see is just more folks knowing that we exist. And so, having teachers tell other teachers about us. This is pretty much how we've grown to where we are now. And I'd like to see just more people taking us up and getting use out of us. For sure.
More teachers having more of their own community capacity to say, hey, this is a cool thing and here's what I did.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, maybe my initiative can help work on that. That's kind of, I think we could, and my wife works she teaches teachers how to teach sustainability. So I can talk to her. Oh,
perfect.
She's at this Children's Environmental Literacy Foundation.
Very cool.
It sounds like what I see is unbelievable potential to take this even further. Feels which might be cool at this stage. When did you start? When was it actually a thing?
Started January 2017. We got our official nonprofit from the IRS thing in February 14th, 2019. And now here we are, 2021.
Pretty cool. Are you still in Connecticut, or where are you based?
No, I've moved to Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia. My entire family's in Philadelphia. I love this city, and there's also just like so many opportunities in Philadelphia to make an impact and connect with people. And I just love this town. So I am in Philadelphia.
Is there outside of the sciences, is anyone doing something like this too? I mean, engineering is very connected to the science fields, but is there a Skype an engineer? I think there should be Skype a journalist, actually.
Yeah, I haven't
heard. Has that spread outside of your arena at all, or not? Our
area of expertises range from social science to engineers, all scientists, and medical doctors and veterinarians. Engineers are absolutely included in our program. But then you get into journalists, artists, I'd love to see those folks connect, but that's somebody else's program. That's not our program. But yeah, just connecting with people in these fields would be really great.
I didn't ask you about during the pandemic in terms of public health and mask wearing and the science of the virus and the like. Mm-hmm. Was there much of a pulse of use of Skype a scientist around the public health questions and that?
Big time. Yeah, everybody wanted to talk to a virologist last April. So our virologists were booked up big time. And we did sessions on virology, on vaccines, on all that sort of thing. But then I think people honestly got so sick of hearing about it that they were like, let's just hear about pandas today. Let's talk about coral reefs. Let's talk about something else, because you get it all day, every day, and have been for a year. So here we are.
Yeah, well, that makes sense too. And essentially that creates a window of opportunity to dig in on the other sciences if people are locked down. And that's so interesting. I'm just looking through the Twitter flow to see if there was anything much about that. Well, this is, I guess we could close out by just thinking about next steps one more time. If universities, is there anything that universities can be doing? It's more.
They can help
engaging with what you're
scientists. Doing? I want to encourage scientists to write us into their NSF grants as part of their broader impacts. That would be wonderful. Also, one of the things that I would really like to see once it's safe for us to gather again is, so one of the things I was building right before, in March, I had ready to release, was protocols for scientists to run events in their communities. Because we know that, so we love connecting with classrooms. It works. It's successful. It's a well-oiled machine at this point. But one thing that I really want to see scientists on the whole do more of is meeting people where they already are gathering and connecting with them about science there. So at community centers, at the park, on the subway platform, wherever people just are going to exist, I want scientists connecting with people there. There's a group called Micro Museums. They have these it's about the size of a vending machine, and they're little museums that they pop up at the DMV and out on the subway platform and all sorts of places. And I just love I love that. I just think that giving people access to science and curiosity as adults is also important, because with climate change and many other things, we can't just focus on kids. We have to focus on adults too. We don't have the amount of time to wait for kids to grow up and be the changers in the world. We need it right now. And so connecting with adults in non-preachy, just fun ways, I think is important for building trust between scientists and everybody else. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see universities that are maybe not in cities, that are in the smaller towns. I want to see scientists at those places taking our protocols and running with them, and figuring out what works for their local community. Because I have lived between Philadelphia and Boston my whole life. I don't know what's going to work in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. I may not even know what's going to work in the Pacific Northwest. And so if you're living in that place, you grew up in that place, you have connections wherever that scientist is, I want to see those scientists leading the way in those places.
That's pretty great. So there are resources on your page that
Yep.
folks can look at to understand how they can, again, be part of the action.
Yeah, so if you scroll down on this page under how it works, you'll see a little area that says resources under here. And then, yeah, right there, other resources for scientists, other resources for teachers. And in the scientist page,
Right.
you'll see that we have a protocol that you can download for running science trivia.
Okay.
And so you can also get to learn about, little groups that we think are super important. One of those is, of course, 500 Women Scientists,
Right.
are amazing. And Dozer, which is a group through AAAS that helps scientists connect with faith-based communities. And so we think their work is so important. But you can download the protocol. I have like 180 something pages of trivia questions that you can just take, so you don't have to do a lot of the work yourself. I explain how I have run those trivia events. So I think there you go, protocol.
Right there.
So I'll hopefully include more as we go.
Huh.
So it has everything you need to think about. And things I've learned either a normal way or the hard way in running trivia at a lot of different places.
That's really great. That's great. Well, this is an important part of what I hope people will take away from this conversation. This is the Monday shows I do here are called Thriving Online, and they're essentially skill building or skill spreading. That's the effort here. So it's great to see you're spreading the gospel of connectivity.
Trying, yeah.
Let's see here. Promote.
Yep.
What are some of the other key lessons?
I think one of the things that we need to remind ourselves, there's two like big lessons that I want scientists to remember when they're doing science communication out in the world. One, remind yourself that what you enjoy doing might not be what the people you're trying to reach enjoy doing. So like maybe the idea of like a science cafe where after work you go and you give a short engaging talk on your work over beers, maybe that sounds fun to you, but like not everybody wants to go to school after being at work all day. And so think about who's going to show up to that event. It's going to be the group that I affectionately refer to as the NPR crowd, the crowd that I am certainly a part of. But you may not reach the people that you claim to reach in your broader impacts statement, right? So like my Science After Hours event, it's an NPR crowd for sure, online. But that's not necessarily the purpose of the online trivia for us. But when we go out to the bars, we're reaching a different group. Maybe somebody who didn't expect to play with a microscope that night, or my preserved anglerfish that I have in a jar over here, or whatever. And so that's one thing. Secondly, ask yourself whether you're the right person to go into that community that you want to reach. You might need to find somebody else to be the face of it and not you. And that depends really on who you're trying to reach. Also think about community partners that you can work with. It doesn't have to be like a lot of times in science, we're like, okay, this is my lab and we need to figure this out all on our own, like this lone genius problem that academia has. Remind yourself that, you're not the right person to do everything, and asking for help and finding community partners can go a long way. And reminding yourself that just because you're the expert in the science doesn't mean that you're the expert in the community that you're working with. And so that's important to know. And there's so many things I could tell you, but let's just leave it there so I don't ramble for too long.
No, that's great. This has been a really good brief midday session. I know you and I both have crazy lives.
Yeah.
And so what is the kind of, like, what is your day like? What are the things you are dealing with to run this?
I'm answering a lot of teacher emails. I'm setting up sessions for live sessions. I'm writing science trivia, which means I'm reading a lot of popular science books, because coming up with 5 rounds of trivia every week for over a year, I've run out of science facts in my brain. So I need to dig deep on there. Like last week, so the week before last, so we're setting up a bug zoo in Philadelphia this summer. So I went into the New Jersey Pine Barrens and collected silk moth cocoons that I will then have hatch and allow people to watch in Philadelphia. So that's like, I mean, you know, my days are pretty varied, because what we do is trying to try new things to see what works for connecting people with science. And so, kind of inspired by the micro museums, I want to put engaging stuff just like in a neighborhood and see how it goes, see if people engage with it. My car is another example of that. I drive the Squid mobile, which is my car that has squid painted all over it, and the back says, "Want a squid fact? Text squid to 9-rung squid." And so things like that like let people engage with science in low risk ways. Like they don't have to do much for that to happen. If you type in Squid mobile, I think it should probably come up.
I will look for it in a second. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like that's so my days are all over the place. And sometimes also fundraising is really, really, really important. And if you'd like to support us, we would really, really appreciate it. And that's patreon.com/Skype-a-scientist.
Patreon.com/Skype-a-scientist. I'll put it in the, I'm going to show your Squidmobile, which looks like it's made it into the Philadelphia Inquirer, I'm sure.
It has, yeah.
Hold on a second. That's great. So here you are. Yep. Other than never not working, are there any downsides to this? Or have you felt frustrations? You know, the world still has these gaps when culture drives people's perceptions of a risk, like with COVID-19. Science always gets to the background, it's actually consciously fought. And I don't know if that feels discouraging, or you just always feel like you wake up in the morning with enough energy to go at it.
I mean, this year has been really hard in a lot of ways. I think seeing science denial is a problem, but what really like just cuts me off at the knees is seeing the amount of hate in the world. Having to be on social media for my job, pretty much to keep people engaged with us and continuing to support us can be pretty harrowing, because that means that every day I'm just constantly devouring like all the horrible things that have happened in the world and feeling like kind of helpless to solve them. I mean, climate change, of course, is a problem, but just like this racial hate is what really like drags on me and weighs on me every day. And so that is like, that's the worst part. Just wishing I could make things better faster, and knowing that I am not enough is the worst part of my job. But what can we do but try our best and work really hard? I don't know.
That's all you can do. Here's the page for the Patreon page for those who are interested in learning more.
Yeah, if you support us at $20 a month, you automatically get into trivia every week. So if that is something you'd like to do, that's one thing. And then once a month, we do like a science game show where I bring in scientists and we play a game. So tonight is that monthly game. So if you become a patron before tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, you can join us for our science game. We've got Zach Martelluzzi from Atlas Obscura and Peter Coffey. He is a entomologist. So the three of us will be playing a game with animal facts tonight at 8.
Have you had your own favorite moment you've seen, or that ends up you've been described to you by a teacher, where this really went crazy, when kids super engaged? What's the best of the world seem like when you're seeing keeping track of what's going on?
I think so every week we hear some version of, there was a student in my class who wasn't super engaged and was kind of like feeling whatever about school broadly. And then we had our Skype a Scientist session and they saw what a scientist actually is and does, and they got excited. And then so I'll get forwarded emails from like that student's mom, or like the thank you notes from the classrooms, and seeing the kids' perspectives on how much fun they had and what like how their eyes kind of got opened to what's possible. Is like it's not one event, it's like it happens all the time. And if you just follow us on Twitter, I'll retweet a lot of those. Some of them aren't public, some of them I just get in my email, but it's just like it's a slow, steady trickle of these really positive, like, okay, this is working, like moments that really keep me going.
That's great. And there seem to be some scientists who are just built for this, and others maybe who aren't so much. Sometimes that gets. Is there a way to become more conversant as a scientist, more comfortable with what you would need to do to engage fully with students?
I think practicing a lot helps. I think having like displays, activities, demos are always beneficial. But some scientists don't like to do it, and I do not think that that's bad. I mean, if you are not one of these people who wants to connect, like, that's fine. You don't have to. But hopefully there are enough of us who do that we'll all make it work. And so just practice. Because a lot of times, we forget what makes sense to people who haven't been in the field for 20 years. And so getting kind of a reminder of what sentences translate and out of science and what don't is something that requires practice and maintenance, just like, building a muscle. And so not staying only in your academic circles for a really long time, like make sure that every once in a while you break out, especially for people like whose families may also be like scientists. It's hard, I think, for them. I don't have that problem. My family, it's easy to, it's a constant practice in science communication. And so I'm really grateful for them. So, just don't let yourself get too in the weeds in your life. Break out and talk to people who aren't like you.
Yeah, that feels vital. And there are some people who just seem to be, I guess this gets back to what Ayana was saying. Make sure that in your Venn diagram, the thing you love is part of it.
Yes.
And most scientists love the work they do. And one of the other hashtags that caught my attention, this is like 10 years ago, was I am a scientist because. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And what was so great about it is, and I actually have used that as a writing exercise with scientists who are a little reluctant to engage the public. I say, if you start with I am a scientist because, you're not starting with I use a spectrophotometer to understand X.
Right. Yeah.
It's the motivation part. It's the drive. It's what wakes me up or keeps me up.
What brings me joy, what gets me out of bed. Yeah.
Now I'm going to show you like one of the best examples ever of that. I was up at Cornell. I did a residency. I was a visiting professor there for a while, and I met a woman who maybe she's done Skype a Scientist. She studies a particular spider. Oh, here we go. Linda Rayner.
Oh my God.
I know.
This is I'm trying to get better about spiders, but spiders honestly.
Sorry. I don't want to.
No. I'm not like arachnophobic. I was as a kid.
But listen to her voice.
Better.
Listen to her.
I can't hear her.
Oh, you can't hear it? Maybe I didn't turn on the volume. You can see it in her eyes.
You can just see in her eyes like that this is what she gets
so
out of bed for. I love seeing people who are into weird things that are really excited about those things.
And just that zeal. And some of that, I think that's part of the practice. As you said, the more you talk to folks and get out of the fear of explaining the science, as opposed to explaining the question. Like, what is it that drives you? And these are these really unusual spiders that live in colonies. They eat each other. And it's the thing that sparks her eyes there is not the technology or the
Right.
the methodology, it's the question.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be part of the key thing here.
I
Getting
agree.
comfortable with questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Well, it's been great to have you back.
Yeah,
Maybe
thanks
we'll
for
do
having
this
me.
once a year.
Sounds good.
And I do think that for me, the maybe I can help foster that conversation around the connectivity among the teachers or users to build some of those cross-linking conversations, so kids can then who've gotten turned on by particular scientists' work can become a bit of a community. That feels
Yeah.
like a cool next step, perhaps. Anything I can do
Agreed.
to help
I'll
is,
let you know.
I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so
that's
much.
that's what I try to do here at the Earth Institute, or the Initiative on Communication and Sustainability. And Thriving Online is our weekly Monday effort to get people to think more creatively and to share ideas around these kinds of questions. So Sarah McAnulty of Skype a Scientist, thank you so much again for being part of this show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Really
And
appreciate it.
Keep up the great work. I don't know
Thanks.
how you
I
do
will
it.
do.
So Thursdays, people should definitely
Come to
look for
trivia.
trivia. Great. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.